Welcome to the Shorten anime channel. Today we'll dive into the latest episode of Battle Through the Heavens. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support the channel. Battle Through the Heavens, Season 1, Episode 5. Seeing the young man slowly coming over, Xiaomei and her group slowed to a halt. Their previous laughter had also died out. The young girls by Xiaomei's side widened their eyes while looking at the young man that was once the clan's pride. The expressions on their faces were varied, from sympathy to something else. Xiaomei stopped in place. In her mind, she still felt attached and wanted to chat with the young man that had once captured her heart. But reality told her that the difference between the two of them was too large for them to be together, and wasting time on a cripple isn't exactly smart. Her brows furrowed before relaxing. In Xiaomei's mind, she thought, let's say hi. No matter what, he's still my Biao-Ge. Ignorant to Xiaomei's thoughts, Xiaoyan still had his hands behind his head and was lazily walking over. Watching the ever closer Xiaoyan, a smile appeared on Xiaomei's face. But the actions of the young man froze the smile on her small face, making it seem as if she was making a weird face. With both hands behind his head, Xiaoyan ignored the group and looked straight as he walked past the young girls without any hesitation. Opening her red, small mouth at the young man's shadow, Xiaomei was shocked. With her beauty, when had she ever had such a horrible treatment? She felt an embarrassed anger and couldn't help but yell, "Xiaoyan Biao-Ge!" Stopping, Xiaoyan didn't turn around, and his bland tone was emotionless, as if he was talking to a stranger. What? The emotionless and bland voice stunned Xiaomei, and she whispered, "Nothing." Xiaoyan's brows jumped, but he shook his head and started walking forward again. Watching the disappearing shadow, Xiaomei angrily stomped her feet and went onto a different path. Rounding a turn, Xiaoyan looked up to a spacious room. On the plaque of the room were three flamboyant and blood-red words, Do Technique Hall. Hearing the yells within the Do Technique Hall, Xiaoyan was quite surprised. Normally, no one came to the hall, so why was it so noisy today? Shrugging his shoulders, Xiaoyan stepped forward and entered the Do Technique Hall. Once Xiaoyan went inside the hall, quite a few cheers from other clan members greeted him. The Do Technique Hall was split into an east and west section. In the east section were the clan's Do techniques, while the west section was a large training field. Right now, there were quite a few people gathered around the training field and watching two people at the middle of the field. Looking at the density of Xiaoningge's Do Qi, is he at 8 Duan Qi? Hey, just 2 months ago, Xiaoning Biao-Ge got to 8 Duan Do Qi. But even though he has 8 Duan Do Qi, Shuner Biao-Mei has 9 Duan Do Qi. Xiaoning Biao-Ge doesn't have a high chance of winning. Good luck, Shun Biao-Mei! Hearing the voices from the crowd, Xiaoyan paused his footsteps and glanced around at the training field. Finally, his interested gaze landed on the young girl wearing a light purple dress. How does she have the time to fight with others? Xiaoyan thought in his mind before going to the east side of the hall and taking a random black scroll from a shelf. Opening up the scroll, large yellow words appeared. Middle yellow. Shattering Rock Hand. Lazily leaning on the bookshelf, Xiaoyan read the training methods to the Shattering Rock Hand, while occasionally glancing at the ferocious battle in the training field. The spacious hall seemed to be separated into two worlds. The west side was noisy while the east side was peaceful and calm. Junayer's opponent was a young man at about the age of 17-18. He was quite handsome and similar to Jia Liao, who Xiaoyan had seen the other day. The young man was called Xiao Ning and was the top elder's grandson. Even though he was only 17, he had already gotten to 8 Duan Qi, and in the entire clan, only Shuner was better than him. Xiaoyan had a neutral impression of this Biao-Ge. They only occasionally met and always said customary greetings before hurrying off. Maybe it was because of the unfriendly atmosphere between his father and the top elder, but Xiaoyan was always able to feel animosity emanating from him. But while Xiaoyan was crippled, he had never went out of his way to taunt or tease Xiaoyan. Lightly smiling, Xiaoyan discarded his thoughts and went back to studying the Shattering Rock Hand. On the training field, Shuner was like a light purple butterfly that avoided the swift attacks by Xiaoning, gracefully and elegantly. However, on her delicate face, No emotions, such as weariness or the like, surfaced. After blocking another one of Xiaoning's attacks, Juner's gaze lazily swept across the hall, but suddenly her movement stopped. Seeing the absorbed young man in the east side of the hall, a light and elegant smile floated onto Shuner's face. The girl's sudden smile made the spectators stunned at the beauty of Shuner. "Shuner, Biaomei, watch out!" Right when Shuner was distracted, a young voice called out from within the crowd. Feeling the violent pressure coming from behind her, Shuner furrowed her brows, but her gaze stayed on the young man below the bookshelf. At the same time, Xiao Yan had lifted his head, and seeing the sneak attack directed at Shuner, he furrowed his brows and shook his head. His look revealed a restrained worry. Seeing the worried look on Xiao Yan's face, Shuner mischievously blinked her beautiful eyes. Suddenly, she took a small step toward the left. Even though it was just a step, it strangely helped her dodge all of Xiaoning's attacks. While she was dodging, her clear white hand sparkled gold and went straight between Xiaoning's hands and lightly landed on his chest. Turning around in a circle, Shuner gracefully counteracted the force, while Xiaoning had to step back a dozen steps and out of the training field. To be able to defeat Xiaoning with one attack, the spectators all gave thunderous applause to Xiaoxun. Hey, Shuner Biaomei is really at the top in the younger generation of the clan. You're really strong." Even though Xiaoning had just been defeated by Shuner, he had a smile as he walked back to the middle of the training field. Calmly looking at the girl in front of him, the fervent love in Xiaoning's eyes wasn't hidden at all. Even though they were technically Biaogei Mei, Xiaoning knew that in the entire clan, many of the members didn't have close blood relations, and for Xiaoxun, he knew that she wasn't related by blood to him. As if she didn't feel the fervent gaze of Xiaoning, Shuner respectfully shook her head and said, "Xiaoning Biaoge, let me win." After saying that, she didn't wait for a response from Xiaoning and went straight to the eastern part of the hall with a big smile. Being the center of attention, Shuner's movements were detected by everyone, and following the intended path of Shuner, they found Xiaoyan. Even though Xiaoyan was now the center of attention to the previous spectators, Xiaoyan didn't look up and was absorbed in his own world. Xiaoyan Gege. The young girl shyly stood in front of Xiaoyan, while her delicate white hands fluttered behind her. She slightly leaned forward, and her beautiful eyes twinkled into crescent moons. On her beautiful face were two light dimples. Shifting his gaze from the scroll in front of him, Xiaoyan peered at the young girl in front of him, and then turned his gaze to include the entire hall. Seeing the fervent stares aimed at him, he couldn't help but say, "Girl, I know your charm is quite large, but you don't need for me to share it, do you?" The girl used by Xiaoyan isn't a mean nickname, but a common and familiar saying to younger family members. Heh heh. Smiling, Shuner sat next to Xiaoyan and lazily stretched backwards, causing her charming curves to be revealed by her tight outfit. Randomly taking a scroll from the bookshelf, Shuner stared at Xiaoyan before asking, "Xiaoyan Gege got to 4th Duanqi?" Hearing that, Xiaowan, who was absorbed by his scroll, looked up. For the first 10 Duanqi, the Do Qi stays weak and almost undetectable. Unless one actively used Du Qi or an examination monument was used, it is impossible to find out what Duanqi someone has. But just a moment ago, Shuner only looked at Xiao Yao for a couple of seconds and determined what Duanqi he was at. Very surprising. This girl, who is she? The Do techniques that she had just used in her fight with Xiaoning was definitely a high-level Do technique, and definitely not one owned by Xiao clan. Thinking about the few inconsistencies with Shuner, Shenyan tilted his head to look at the smiling Shuner beside him. Shrugging his shoulders, he nodded. 4th Duan. Seeing Xiaoyan nod, the smile on Shuner's face widened, and she said, "It's related to your training for the past half month, right?" "Yeah." Slightly nodding, Xiaoyan didn't deny it, and returned his gaze to the scroll while asking, "How do you have the time to come out and compete with someone?" "I'm bored." Imitating Xiaoyan's shrugs, Shuner smiled while showing a sorrowful face. After last time, Xiaoyan Gege hasn't come to see Shuner. Are you afraid that Zhener will force you to return the money? Xiaoyan paused and awkwardly laughed. The coming-of-age ritual is next year, so do you think I have time to not train? Raising his head and seeing the sad face on Shuner, He lightly patted Shuner's head and whispered, "I'll try to find time to be with Shuner from now on." Hearing Xiaoyan's promise, Shuner's small face relaxed. But her talk with Xiaoyan had made every single person in the hall red-eyed at Xiaoyan. Looking at the two of them, below the bookshelf, Xiaoning's face was extremely ugly, and his hand curled into fists before relaxing, and then curled them back up again. Being the grandson of the top elder of the clan, Xiaoning had always felt that he was special. Towards Shun-er, Xiaoning had already, in his own mind, set her as his wife. Of course, it was one-sided. But seeing his wife was flirting with someone else made Xiaoning extremely envious. More importantly, the person whom Shun-er was flirting with was the cripple of the clan. As rage surged in his eyes, Xiaoning let out a huge breath and put on a calm and welcoming smile. Adjusting his messy clothes, he walked towards the two under the eyes of everyone in the hall. In the hall, the spectators happily smirked when they saw Xiaoning walking towards Shun-er and Xiaoyan. Of course, their smirks were not directed at Xiaoning, but rather at the seemingly ignorant Xiaoyan. Gazing over the chi paths depicted on the scroll, Xiaoyan memorized the pressure points and chi paths necessary for shattering rock hand. Letting out a breath, Xiaoyan's originally relaxed brows furrowed. With his strong soul perception, Xiaoyan was able to observe the actions of everyone within the hall, including Xiaoning, who was walking towards him. This girl brings so much trouble. Sighing, Xiaoyan rolled up the scroll in his hand. He, Xiaoyan Biaodi, are you here to learn Du techniques? Do you need Biaoji, me to help you find a couple of high-leveled ones? For some of the techniques, I don't think that you have the right to access them. Smiling in front of Xiaoyan, Xiaoning spoke arrogantly. Biaodi is the young version of Biaoge, which is older brother not in one's immediate family. Xiaoyan placed the scroll back onto the bookshelf and shook his head. Thanks for the offer, but I don't think I need them right now. Oh, hey, I forgot. Xiaoyan Biaodi only has 3 Duan Qi, so it would be pretty hard to learn high-level techniques. Lightly massaging his forehead, Xiaoning smiled. The ridicule in his tone was also displayed on his face. Xiaoyan sighed again. Xiaoning was ridiculing him on purpose. A slight curve appeared on Xiaoyan's face while he said, I know you're trying to get Shuner's attention, but I have to say, you are quite childish. Hearing the ruthless words of Xiaoyan, Xiaoning's face darkened. He had never thought that the normally silent Xiaoyan would have the courage to stand up against him. He sneered and said, Looks like Xiaoyan Biaodi has an opinion about me. How about we test out our skills? It'll help me see how much Biaodi has improved in the past few years. Shall I test my skills against you? Placing down her scroll, Shun-er looked up coldly. Xiaoning's eyelid jumped when he saw Shun-er speaking up for Xiaoyan. With his envy burning even higher, Xiaoning taunted, Do you only know to hide behind women? Why didn't you dare to say such things 3 years ago? Xiaoyan tiptoed to reach for another scroll, blowed off the dust on it, and emotionlessly replied to Xiaoning. To be honest, Xiaoyan's emotionless and relaxed appearance, in the eyes of people who aren't too friendly with him, made them feel as if there was something stuck on their chest. Xiaoning grinded his teeth together, making GG sounds, but even though he was enraged, he didn't dare hurt Xiaoyan, since no matter how horrible Xiaoyan's talent was, he was still the son of the clan leader. Taking a deep breath, Xiaoning stared at Xiaoyan and coldly said, Xiaoyan, you're no longer the genius you were 3 years ago. The you right now a cripple. You don't deserve Shun-er. If you are a man, then you would leave right now. Or else, even though I can't fight you right now, next year when you perform the coming-of-age ritual, you have to accept the challenge by a clansman. If you don't want to become a real cripple, then I would suggest for you to get out of here right now and go hide in some poor remote place where you'd live out the rest of your life. Hearing the threats Xiaoning made, the edges of Xiaoyan's mouth curved upwards, and he tilted his head to inspect Xiaoning with a strange gaze. Afterwards, he rolled his eyes, picked up the scroll, and walked outwards. Seeing Xiaoyan's movements, Xiaoning believed that Xiaoyan had grudgingly agreed to his words, but before he could celebrate his victory, a sentence came from Xiaoyan's mouth and made Xiaoning's face green. All right, next year, try to beat me into a cripple. Ignoring the cold gazes behind him, Xiaoyan hugged the scroll and checked it out with the manager of the Do Technique Hall. Then he, along with Shun lazily walked out of the hall while chatting. Brat, just wait. When you get kicked out of the clan, I'll have all the time in the world for revenge. Without the clan leader's protection, you are nothing. Watching the disappearing Xiaoyan, Xiaoning felt a fury burn in his chest. As if to show his dedication, he smacked the bookshelf next to him, leaving a light handprint. After leaving the Do Technique Hall, Xiaoyan first accompanied Shun to nearby mountains for an entire afternoon before going back to his room when the sky turned dark. After getting back to his room and closing the door, Xiaoyan's shoulders sagged down. After placing his scroll on a nearby table and drinking a cup of tea, he fearfully said, "This girl, she sure can walk." That girl's history isn't normal either. An old voice resounded through the room. Tiredly raising his head and seeing the ghost-like Yao Lao, Xiaoyan curled his lips and asked, "Does teacher know her history?" Hey, I think I know a bit." Yao Lao smiled, but when he saw Xiaoyan's curious glance, he said, "Don't ask. It's useless to you right now. So it's better if you don't waste your effort on it. What I can say is that her background is pretty powerful." Rolling his eyes, Xiaoyan gave Yao Lao a middle finger. "Why did you go get this trash? Do you think that you have a lot of time?" Yao Lao came to the table and flipped through the scroll, only to be appalled by it. "Trash!" Xiaoyan cried out. "Besides vacuum hand, I don't know any other do techniques. Before, I only knew to train restlessly and didn't know any do techniques, and only the Huang level do techniques can be learned by anyone in the clan. If I don't learn these, what would I use to defeat others in the coming of age ritual?" "Oh, so you want to swindle a do technique from me?" The shrewd Yao Lao understood Xiaoyan's intent immediately. Even though Xiaoyan had his plan exposed, he didn't pretend as if that wasn't his plan, and instead looked at Yao Lao with puppy eyes. "What's so great about Dao techniques? Once you learn alchemy, people will be fighting to gift you high-level Do techniques." Yao Lao lightly smiled and ignored the ever-darkening face of Xiaoyan. "But I need high-level Do techniques right now," Xiaoyan said depressedly. Seeing the sad Xiaoyan, Yao Lao laughed cheerfully. "Whatever. After all, you are my student, although somewhat pitiful. So that you don't become a cripple, I'll teach you something." Hearing that, Xiaoyan perked up. He was very curious as to what kind of do technique his mysterious teacher would give him. "Even though your vacuum hand is Zhuan level, it's somewhat weak for a technique at that level. Since your do chi isn't too strong right now, I'll teach you a Dao technique that's at the Xuan level, but only needs for you to be at 5 Duan Qi to be useful." "What tier in the Xuan level?" Hearing that the technique was another Xuan level Do techniques, the eyes of Xiaoyan lit up, and he asked while licking his lips, "I think it was Xuan high level. I remember that the owner of this Dao technique begged me to accept it, even though I didn't have much interest in such things. He was really persistent, so I accepted and made a pill for him," Yao Lao carelessly said. His casual mentionings made the Xuan level Do technique seem like trash. "Xuan high level? Begging to give you it?" A few black lines appeared on the forehead of Xiaoyan. The technique that was a whole tier higher than the top Do technique in the entire Xiao clan was worthless in the eyes of Yao Lao. Xiaoyan didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the huge difference. "Close your eyes and focus. I'll teach it to you." After ordering Xiaoyan, Yao Lao stretched out his finger and lightly tapped Xiaoyan's forehead. With a slight headache, Xiaoyan felt a huge amount of information flood into his brain. "Octane Blast, Zhuan High Level, Do Technique, Close Combat Do Technique. Focus on attacks, and when mastered, attacks have 8 different forces that stack up, and the power is equal to a Dai Low level Do Technique." Slowly regaining his senses and quickly skimming over the new information, Xiaoyan let out a breath. The attack is equal to a Dai Low level Do Technique? In the Du Qi mainland, whether it's a Dao technique or a Qi method, the difference between a Yuan level technique and a Dai level technique was enormous. The Dai level technique would be on a completely different level, and yet this Octane Blast claims that it can rival a Dai level technique with its attack. Swallowing dryly, Xiaoyan's eyes became blank. If I really learn this Dao technique, then I can probably beat up Xiaoning with my 4 Duan Qi. Don't be too greedy. Even though Octane Blast doesn't have high requirements of one's Du Qi, it has a huge toll on the body. This technique is a close combat Do technique, and with your weak arms and legs, if you really try to use it, you'll probably end up with broken limbs before you even touch your opponent. Yao Lao's voice was like a bowl of cold water and washed away Xiao Yan's excitement. How would I increase the strength of my body? After pausing, Xiao Yan hurriedly asked. Raising Dou Qi is the best way to increase the strength of one's body. With higher Dou Qi, the body will become stronger. Of course, if you want to go faster, then you would need some external stimulus. Yao Lao's eyes twinkled with mischief. What external stimulus? Watching the smiling Yao Lao, Xiao Yan suddenly felt a great danger. Get beat up. The more you get beat up, the better. Yao Lao had a cold laugh while Xiao Yao had a stiff face. In the morning, a pale mist had shrouded the surrounding summit and lingered for a very long time. A gentle wind blew by, and suddenly a physical grunt could be heard. Behind the summit, in a hidden groove, both of Xiao Yan's feet were inserted into the soil like tree stumps. His toes clung to the ground while he gnashed his teeth together and had cold sweat pour over his forehead. He only wore short pants, and on his naked upper body were crisscross scars. Behind Xiao Yan was Yao Lao in spirit mode, cross-legged above a giant stone. His face was solemn as he gazed at Xiao Yan, clenching his teeth to fight off the pain, and then his palm softly swung upwards. Following Yao Lao's palm, a red materialized Dou Qi shot out from Yao Lao's palm. Just like a whip, it harshly smashed against Xiao Yan's shoulder, leaving behind a long bruise. As the corners of his mouth violently trembled, Xiao Yan inhaled cold air through the slivers between his teeth in response to the pain. Xiao Yan's shoulder numbed, and a wave of scorching pain made its way to his heart. Under the brutal pain, Xiao Yan felt his feet soften and almost fell off balance. Under the violent pain, the original weak Dou Qi within Xiao Yan became more animated than before and quickly flowed through the Qi paths and pressure points on Xiao Yan's shoulder. Strands of cool slowly seeped into his bones and quietly strengthened in the progress. Again! When the pain on his shoulder gradually faded away, Xiao Yan's young face was filled with persistence and stubbornness, and yelled while clenching his teeth. Looking at persevering Xiao Yan, a gratified smile appeared on Yao Lao's withered face. Slightly nodded, a red materialized Dou Qi shot out from his palm again. Bang, bang, bang. Within the small forest, as strike after strike hit Xiao Yan, low grunts along with naked hits sounded. Every one of Yao Lao's attacks were at the exact point of maximum endurance for Xiao Yan's body. The attacks wouldn't harm Xiao Yan seriously, but still brought Xiao Yan the maximum pain possible. The pain from the Dou Qi lashes caused an unbearable pain, forcing Xiao Yan's young face to contort in agony. On his body with Yao Lao's swings, more and more crisscross scars appeared. Bang! Another materialized Dou Qi shot out, and the wood stake like Xiao Yan finally reached his limit. With weakened legs, he fell down paralyzed. Fiercely gasped for air, Xiao Yan wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead, and lifting his head up to make a rough smile, he asked, "Teacher, how was it?" "Not bad. You took 84 Dou Qi lashes today. That's a lot better than when you started out half a month ago and only able to take 9 lashes. Yao Lao had a smile on his face and nodded. A glint of surprise flirted across his eyes. In the past half month, the tenacity that Xiao Yan displayed was far beyond what was originally expected. For example, today, Yao Lao had originally thought that 70 Dou Qi lashes was Xiao Yan's limit, but the later had persevered to 84 lashes. Yao Lao could not help but admire the spirit of Xiao Yan. After listening to Yao Lao words, Xiao Yan let out a deep breath and slumped on the ground. When he regained feeling, he slowly crawled back up and put back on the clothing he had taken off and placed on a nearby rock. When wearing the clothes, whenever the cool fabric touched against the bruises, Xiao Yan winced and gritted his teeth. The transparent Yao Lao turned into a ray of light and disappeared within the black ring. Before disappearing, he left behind a phrase that he had said countless times. Quickly go back and submerge yourself within the foundation elixir to make sure that the congested blood doesn't leave behind hidden wounds. Nodding, Xiao Yan finished putting on his clothes and left the forest. Once Xiao Yan finally made it back to his room while enduring the pain, he quickly took off his clothes once again and jumped into his wooden bowl of green liquid. The ice-cold green liquid alleviated the pains from the bruised skin and Xiaoyan slowly closed his eyes, enjoying the soothing liquid flow over his skin. After a while, Xiaoyan's rushed breathing slowly calmed and even incorporated a couple of snores. After a painful beating, Xiaoyan couldn't take the fatigue on both his body and mental state and fell asleep. While Xiaoyan was asleep, the green liquid rippled slightly and slivers of peaceful energy quietly slipped into Xiaoyan's open pores. They washed away the lashes of congested blood, and at the same time they revitalized and strengthened the muscles that were already at their utmost limit. While sleeping, Xiaoyan's body had been strengthened to a whole new level. While strengthening and repairing Xiaoyan's muscles, the green liquid slowly became lighter and lighter. Obviously, the energy in the liquid was decreasing. Unaware of how long he had fallen asleep, Xiaoyan only knew that the warm sunlight had already brightened his room when he woke up. Stretching out his body, his bones suddenly made rattling noises. When he lifted his head, he realized that his entire body was full of energy and power. Xiaoyan couldn't help but yell out, "Great!" As Xiaoyan stepped out from the wooden bowl, he unexpectedly discovered that the bowl of foundation elixir had already turned into transparent water from its originally green state. My elixir had already been used up? Scratching his nose, Xiaoyan helplessly shook his head. Suddenly recalling something, he happily closed his eye and carefully sensed his Du-Qi state. A moment later, Xiaoyan opened his eye and happily laughed. Finally, I'm at 5th Duan-Qi. To get to 4 Duan-Qi in half a month, and then 5 Duan-Qi in another month and a half. This incredible speed was impossible even for the old Xiaoyan. Even though at higher levels, raising one's Duan-Qi becomes harder and harder, looking at the speed in which Xiaoyan is rising, it shouldn't be a problem for him to get to 7 Duan-Qi by next year. Of course, this is under the assumption that Xiaoyan has enough foundation elixir, or else Xiaoyan would definitely die under the severe beatings that he endures every day before getting to 7 Duan-Qi. After all, without the foundation elixir, Xiaoyan's weak body wouldn't ever be able to withstand the harmful effects of having congested blood, and he would die. Therefore, what Xiaoyan needs to do right now is to buy more material for foundation elixir. Even though it sounds very easy, Xiaoyan has a slight problem. He's broke. Sitting on his bed, Xiaoyan has a bitter laugh. He had never thought that he would be in such an awkward situation because of money. While calculating, from last time, I still have 900 gold coins, but with only so much money, buying the same grade material as last time is not going to happen. Supporting his chin, Xiaoyan's eyes rolled quickly. Suddenly, he asked, "Teacher, for purple bluegrass of bone-washing flour, can we use younger stalks?" "Sure, but then the effects would be much weaker, and the foundation elixirs that I've been refining are tailored for you." Blinking his eyes, Xiaoyan smiled. "No problem. Let's use the worst grade material this time." "The worst grade? Then the effects would be horrible, and you'd need at least half a year to get to the next Duan-Qi." Yao Lao's voice showed his displeasure. He was probably furrowing his brows right now. "Don't have enough money? Go borrow from that girl again. With her background, even a couple 10,000 gold coins would be a small matter. Taking a step back, you can borrow from your dad. Why must you lower the effectiveness of the elixir and slow down your training speed?" Hearing Yao Lao's suggestion, Xiaoyan shook his head. "Just think of it as my self-respect stopping me from doing so. How can I keep on borrowing money from a girl? As for my dad, I've been avoiding him for 2 months now, and if he wants to know why I want the money, then wouldn't I have to expose you?" "Wait, teacher, this foundation elixir, can other people refine or make it?" Suddenly thinking of something, Xiaoyan's brows jumped and he hurriedly asked, "Hey, brat, in the Du-Qi mainland, there are countless herbs, and within these herbs, you must find a combination that both calms the violent energy within monster cores and refine it so that one can absorb it. If you just randomly put herbs together, then the alchemy furnace breaking would be the least of your troubles. The energy might backfire." This foundation elixir was created after experimenting for a couple of years. Of course, there might be someone that also found out how to create it by luck, but the chances of that happening is almost non-existent. In addition, while refining, you must make sure that the fuse rate, amount used, and fire temperature is perfect. You need to do countless experiments and have an incredible soul perception to do that. Or else, why do you think that every alchemist needs a teacher? To become a strong alchemist is impossible without a teacher guiding you. Just the time you spend trying out the different combinations of herbs would cost you your whole life. Therefore, I can't include the entire Duchy mainland, but at least for Gemma Empire, no one else has made a foundation elixir like mine. At this point, Yao Lao's voice incorporated a hint of pride. Surprised by the complexity in the seemingly simple foundation elixir, Xiaoyan instinctively licked his lips. When he looked at Yao Lao refining herbs, it all seemed so simple, but now with Yao Lao's explanation, he realized that the art of alchemy isn't as simple as what he had saw. The alchemy world is definitely huge and mysterious. No wonder an alchemist is the most honorable profession in the entire Duchy mainland. But after his shock, Xiaoyan felt a tinge of glee. Teacher, I'm not going to use the horrible foundation elixir to train. Instead, I wanted to sell it in an auction. Even though I don't have much right now, after the foundation elixir is sold, then I'd have quite a bit. And at that point, buying high-quality material for the foundation elixir would be super easy, right? I see, sure. Alchemists selling their own pills isn't interesting news, and the foundation elixir is at the lowest level of training medicine, so selling it doesn't really matter. After thinking for a while, Yao Lao carelessly said. Hearing Yao Lao's agreement, Xiaoyan quickly got what he needed and rushed out of his room. Because Xiaoyan didn't need high-quality herbs, he carelessly picked the youngest purple bluegrass and bone-washing flower in the pharmacy. And as for the monster core, he brought the cheapest core he could find, the Greenwood Mouse Monster Core. After buying all the medicine, Xiaoyan found a hidden alley and had Yao Lao refine the herbs into the foundation elixir. The foundation elixir this time not only had a much worse effect than last time, it even had a different color. Going from a near-transparent jade green to mottled ugly green. After placing the pill that was the size of half of Xiaoyan's fist into a wild jade bottle that he had bought earlier, Xiaoyan finally let out a relaxed breath. After hiding the jade bottle securely, Xiaoyan left the alley and ran towards Wutan City's largest auction. Premier Auctions. Wutan City's largest auction house and a branch of Jiama Empire's richest family, the Premier family. The Premier family was extremely ancient and had been a quite powerful force in Jiama Empire for a couple of centuries already. Their networks were definitely impressive, and some rumors even claimed that the Premier family had close ties with Jiama Empire's royalty. In the empire, the Premier family, Nalan family, and Ritter family are the three largest families and have various connections in the commercial and military world. Therefore, with the Premier family supporting it, no matter how enticing the profits of the auction were, no one would dare to try anything against them. Looking at the auction house at the end of the street, Zhao Yan turned into a side alley and quickly put on a black robe. Imagine a Harry Potter school robe. The black robe did not only cover up Xiao Yan's face, it also altered his skinny frame to seem a lot wider. Even if Zhui'er was looking at the robed figure, she would not be able to realize it was Xiao Yan. After being covered by a black robe, Xiao Yan let out a relieved breath. It wasn't that Xiao Yan was being too careful, but rather that the foundation elixir was too precious. For clans, the attraction of foundation elixirs was huge. If someone could mass produce it, then it would mean that the younger generation of the clan would grow at an accelerated rate, which would help the clan further their power and in turn lead to a positive cycle. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Xiao Yan could only choose to hide himself. Carefully touching the slightly cold white jade bottle, Xiao Yan slowly walked out of the alley and went towards the auction house at the end of the street. Under the vigilant glances by the fully armored guards, Xiao Yan walked into the auction house without stopping. As soon as Xiao Yan entered the house, the scorching feeling from the sun was replaced with a cool feeling. It made people feel as if they had stepped into a new world. Sweeping through the fancy hall, Xiao Yan quickly found a side room. On the door which led to the room were the shiny words, "Inspection Room." Walking inside, the room was quite empty, and only a middle-aged man who was obviously bored sat there. Hearing the door open, the man raised his head, and upon seeing the black-robed Xiao Yan, his brow slightly furrowed. But immediately, the expression on his face changed to a professional smile. "Sir, do you plan on having something inspected?" "Yes." Under the black robe, a dry and old voice lightly floated out. It was Yao Lao's voice. Xiaoyan walked up and placed the white jade bottle on the desk in front of the middle-aged man. This is? Looking confused, the middle-aged man carefully picked up the white jade bottle and sniffed it. The expression on his face immediately changed, and when he looked back at the black-robed figure, his gaze had a hint of respect. Mister, you're an alchemist? Yes, the aged voice came out again. Could I ask what pill is within this bottle? What does it do? Hearing that he was dealing with an alchemist, the middle-aged man asked with even more respect. Foundation elixir. It can increase Doqi training speed, but only useful for people under the Daozi level. Oh, it can increase the Daoqi training speed? Hearing Yao Lao's words, the expression on the middle-aged man changed. Everyone knew that Doqi could only be trained following a set formula, and since the qi paths for individuals are especially weak at this point, if the effects of the medicine were too fierce, then the qi paths would burst and the person would die. My elixir doesn't have any side effects and the medicinal power is extremely peaceful, so it won't cause something like that to happen. You don't need to worry about that happening. As if he could understand what the middle-aged man was thinking, the wizened voice calmly explained. His expression changing once more, the middle-aged man carefully placed the white jade bottle on the table in front of him and respectfully asked, Mister, could you wait for a second? I need to ask our auction's boneny master to inspect this elixir. Sure, hurry up. Waving his hand, Xiaoyan did not pretend to be polite and sat in a chair to the side. The middle-aged man quickly nodded and hurriedly left the room. Sitting on the chair, Xiaoyao remained silent and didn't attempt to speak with Yao Lao. This was someone else's place, and being cautious was better than not. Who knew if there were things that could listen in on their conversation? After waiting in the room for a little while, the middle-aged man returned with a green-robed elder with slightly whitened hair. On the chest of the elder were not gold stars, but rather something like an alchemy furnace. And on the alchemy furnace were 2 silver lines sparkling with elegance. Mister, this is our auction's boneny master. He's a 3 small dadoshir. At the same time, he's also a second-tier alchemist. The middle-aged man respectfully introduced the newcomer. Hearing the identity of the elder, Xiaoyan's brow instinctively jumped. This was the first time that he met an alchemist beside Yao Lao. He carefully re-examined the elder. The elder had a red face, and even though the green robe seemed ordinary, there were slivers of light surging across it. Obviously, this robe had some kind of a monster core implanted into it. On the elder's commonplace face was an ever-present arrogance, something that all alchemists had. While Xiaoyan was examining boneny was also studying the person in front of him. Alchemists weren't like doges, and alchemists were highly sought after by various forces. Therefore, when boneny was studying Xiaoyan, he was also trying to guess who the alchemist was. The middle-aged man carefully picked up the jade bottle on the table and passed it to boneny. Taking the white jade bottle, boneny first sniffed the sweet fragrance while his old eyes closed slightly. Lightly tipping the bottle, a drop of green liquid slowly rolled from the opening of the bottle to land in the middle of bonny's palm. Staring at the green liquid, boneny whipped out a silver needle, and on the tip of the needle showed a slight Doqi fluctuation. It quietly slipped into the green liquid and slowly stirred. With the stirring of the needle, bonny's calm face changed into a serious expression. Moments later, he placed the green liquid back into the jade bottle. When he looked at Xiaoyan again, his arrogant face had a hint of respect. Turning towards the middle-aged man, he said, "The elixir is at 2nd tier. Everything that was said before is true." Hearing that, the middle-aged man let out a relieved breath and excitedly smiled at Xiaoyan. "Mister, do you plan on auctioning this elixir?" "Yup, can you auction it as soon as possible?" Hey, that's no problem. Mister, take this and go to the first auction room. Luckily, we're having an auction there right now, and your elixir will be auctioned immediately." The middle-aged man smiled while handing over a pitch-black metal card. "Okay." Taking the metal card, Xiaoyan didn't wait and left the room immediately. "Boneny master, is he really an alchemist?" Only after Xiaoyan had left their sight did the middle-aged man whisper quietly to boneny. "Yes, he's an alchemist. His agile soul perception can't be wrong." boneny nodded, but his brow was furrowed and he muttered, "But where did he come from? I haven't heard of any alchemist that can refine a 2nd-tier pill in Wutan City. Shall I do some research?" boneny paused before shaking his head. "Not now. All alchemists have weird tempers, and if he notices you trying to dig up his history, he'll have a bad impression of the auction. To be on the bad side of a mysterious alchemist is never a smart move." Turning around, boneny lightly said, For him to have a good impression of our auction, you should know how to do that, right? Heh, I understand. Remember, even if we can't become friends with him, we can't offend him either. Or else. Leaving behind a couple of cold words, Goonie also left the room. Under the lead of a waitress, Xiao Yan entered the already started auction. Entering the hall where the auction was being held, the originally bright environment darkened while thunderous yells poured everywhere. It made Xiao Yan furrow his brows. The auction was huge and the hall could definitely fit at least hundreds to even thousands of people. At this time, at the center of the hall, under a bright light, a red-robed beauty was using her charming voice to describe the item in her hand. Under the numbing and clear sound of the voice, the item that really wasn't worth much had its price increase at an exponential rate. Finding a remote seat, Xiao Yan quietly sat down and glanced at the beauty in the middle of the hall. With his acute observations, he realized that most of the people were here for her and not the items that were being auctioned. Premier Auction House's top auctioneer, Ya Fei. She was an extremely famous beauty within Wutan City, and her mature charm made many attracted to her. Suddenly, the silent Xiao Yan turned around and stared at a man not too far away from him, but hidden in a corner. His arms were swaying with words of Ya Fei's small red mouth, and his hands disappeared beneath his waist. Damn! Lightly cursing, Xiao Yan, who was under the robe, rolled his eyes. This guy is so shameless. While cursing in his mind, Xiao Yan quickly moved away and bitterly smiled. His gaze once again went to the center of the hall and watched the charming curves of the auctioneer while muttering, Yao Jing. Yao Jing is a derogatory term for beauties. After looking at the item in Ya Fei's hand, Xiao Yan lost his interest. He didn't have that much money to buy a piece of junk, even if the seller of that item was a beautiful woman. After tearing his gaze away from Ya Fei, Xiao Yan started slowly looking around the hall. Father? His gaze stopping, Xiao Yan focused in on a middle-aged man sitting in the front row. Suddenly, his facial expression became one of shock. Does father have an interest in that woman? The odd thought didn't last long because Xiao Yan had discovered that his father's gaze wasn't focused on Ya Fei, but rather was looking into the distance, as if he was waiting for something. Why is father here? Pondering the question, Xiao Yan moved his gaze again. This time, he surprisingly realized that the clan leaders of the other two big clans, Jiali clan and Aoba clan, were here. Something's going to be auctioned that attracts all of them. His brow jumping, Xiao Yan curiously touched his nose. What could have attracted all three of the clan leaders to come here? To be honest, the woman named Ya Fei was an expert at creating the atmosphere. Her glances and smiles would make the price of the item go up exponentially for a while. In addition, every time the price was raised, she would send a charming smile to the person who just called out the latest price, and they would forget their pain of overpaying for the item. The atmosphere within the auction house was kept at a climax with her smiles. Hey, everyone, the auction house has just received a new auction item. I believe that everyone would be interested in it. After auctioning the latest item, Ya Fei suddenly paused and said aloud towards the audience. With a wave of her hand, a waitress quickly brought up a jade plate, and in the middle of the plate was a wild jade bottle. This is a second-tier pill. With her delicate hand picking up the jade bottle, Ya Fei's charming voice calmed the auctioneers for an instant, but soon the yells became even louder. In Doqi mainland, the pills refined by alchemists were the most sought-after items. This thing is named Foundation Elixir. It is only effective to those below the Daoja level. Training in Foundation Elixir allows people under the Daoja level to have an increased efficiency in training. Hey, if you like your son or grandson to be called a genius, this is perfect for you. Her attractive mouth lightly breathed the words and numbed the minds of many of the auctioneers. Foundation Elixir, it can raise one's Doqi training speed? Lady Ya Fei, the people in that stage can't take the pressure of the pill, right? Even though Ya Fei was extremely charming, there were also many people that stayed calm, and after a brief silence, someone raised an essential question. Hey, this elixir was personally inspected by our Goonie master and was found to be a second-tier pill. There will not be a problem. Everyone can be assured of that. Ya Fei lightly laughed while responding. Hearing that Goonie had personally inspected the pill, those with doubt didn't question the validity of the pill anymore. Everyone knew that Goonie master was a second-tier alchemist. In the entire Wutan city, even the clan leaders of the 3 clans were courteous towards him. Xiaoyan lazily leaned on his chair and watched the excited atmosphere within the crowd. Letting out a light breath, he thought, "Looks like this foundation elixir will bring quite a bit of income." Slightly shifting his gaze to his father, Xiaoyan realized that the previously calm expression on his father had slightly changed. 8,500. Right when Yafei's voice stopped, a person yelled out a price. 9,000. Another price came right after the first price had been called. The price quickly went up, and within a couple of seconds, it got to 13,000. Even though Xiaoyan's father was somewhat excited, he didn't call out a price immediately and instead closed his eyes, waiting for the small fry calls to stop. The price went up again, but soon the voices died out. At that time, an elder also sitting in the first row lightly said, 20,000. After calling out that price, the final voices in the auction died out. Some of the hopeful looked towards that emotionless elder, but could only sit back down, disappointed. They didn't have the wealth to be in a price war with the Jia Li clan. Hey, Jia Li B, didn't your son already become a doja? Why are you still thinking about this foundation elixir? A middle-aged man who was also sitting in the first row turned around to fakely smile at Jia Li B. Ao Bapam, can I buy it for my future grandson? Jia Li B obviously didn't like the middle-aged man and coldly sneered at the latter. Let's see if your luck lets you have a grandson. Maybe someday your son finds himself without. After silently cursing at Jia Li B, Ao Bapa also called out, 23,000, 25,000. Within 10 minutes and under the surprised stares of everyone within the auction, the two were like dogs fighting over a meal and raised the price to 31,000. 40,000! The closed-eyed Xiao Zhan suddenly spoke up. Everyone within the auction hall went silent and switched their stares to Xiao Zhan. Even Ao Bapa and Jia Li B were stunned by the sudden raise in the price. Hey, clan leader Xiao, looks like you really want this foundation elixir. Jia Li B smiled. Xiao Zhan glanced at him and said, if you want it, then just raise the price. I promise I won't raise the price again. Jia Li B paused and thought about the truth within Xiao Zhan's words. Soon he shook his head, since his purpose here today wasn't for the foundation elixir, and to waste money that could have gone to that item was not a smart idea. Ao Bapa, on the other side, seeing that Jia Li B stopped raising the price, also shrugged his shoulders. Even though the foundation elixir was extremely tempting, his goal wasn't that. Therefore, he also stopped raising the price. Clan leader Xiao Zhan has bid 40,000 gold coins. Is there anyone that wishes to raise the price? Seeing the calm hall, Yafei smiled while reminding the crowd. Since no one has raised the price, this foundation elixir will go to clan leader Xiao Zhan. Seeing that no one responded, Yafei was smart and lightly tapped her small hammer on the table, signaling that the foundation elixir had found its new owner. In a remote area, Xiaoyan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After so much, he had received the money off of his father. Next, we'll be auctioning the final auction item. Placing the jade bottle back within the plate, Yafei waved her hand and the light in the hall dimmed. Bending down, she took out a silver plate, and in the middle of the plate was a green, unadorned scroll. The scroll was slightly glowing green, and with the reflections off of the silver plate, it was cast in a mysterious light. High Xuan level Qi method, Hurricane Chant. The moment Yafei said high level Xuan Qi method, the entire auction went silent. Compared to the foundation elixir, Du Qi methods were infinitely more valuable. Even though pills were expensive, they were a one-time use item, but Qi methods would last for one's entire life and can even be inherited by one's sons and grandsons. So from a long-term standpoint, a high-level Qi method was much more sought after compared to pills. After all, once a person has a high-level Qi method, even without the support of pills, that person can become a force to be reckoned with after a period of time. On the other hand, if one doesn't have a Qi method and only has pills, then even if that person is eating pills like they are candy, he still would not become too strong. After a brief moment of shock, the auctioneers recovered and sent their burning gazes at the green scroll at the middle of the hall. Even the charming Yafei seemed to have been forgotten. Sitting in the back row, Xiaoyan let out a breath. High Xuan level Qi method? No wonder. The Qi method is an entire tier higher than Shao Clan's top Qi method, Furious Lion's Rage. No wonder that the three clan leaders in Wutan City came here in person, so they were all gunning for this. A high Xuan level, watching the motionless green scroll, Xiaoyan instinctively licked his lips. To own that scroll would basically mean that they have a pass to become a top dojo, and after a few decades, there would be a new force that would rival the three clans in Wutan City. It's only a high Xuan level chi method. What's so special about that? Right when Xiaoyan was fantasizing about the chi method, Yao Lao's voice awkwardly sounded within Xiaoyan. Only... Rolling his eyes, Xiaoyan felt that there was a huge gap between him and the old geezer that would claim top-tier chi methods were trash. He could only purse his lips and remain silent. Brat, just keep on training. The day that you become a doge, I'll let you see what a high-tier chi method is. After Yao Lao finished his thought, he became silent again. Pursing his lips again, Xiaoyan muttered, I hope so. Everyone, this Xuan level chi method was found by a hunter in the mountains. It must have been left behind by an ancestor, so it won't bring anyone any trouble after they buy it. Everyone can bid without fearing that there may be consequences. Yifei carefully held up the green scroll and lightly said, Lady Yafei, can you set the bottom price already? One of the auctioneers impatiently yelled out. Keeping her charming smile, Yafei said, Hurricane chant, bottom price, 200,000 gold coins. After she called out the bottom price, the auction house became visibly quieter. Obviously, a lot of the auctioneers didn't have the wealth to buy such an expensive item. In a remote region, Xiaoyan couldn't help but shake his head. This woman kills people without spilling blood. 200,000 gold coins is equal to the profits of Shao clan for an entire 2 years. Killing people without spilling blood means to indirectly kill someone. Something like, I leave a huge cliffhanger at the end of this chapter. Of course that won't happen, Xiaojan and the other two clan leaders visibly shivered, but they could do nothing about the price. For something as valuable as this, they would be willing to pay such a high price to obtain it. Even if they didn't want to buy it, someone else would. Under the 200,000 price, no one bid at all. Facing the awkward atmosphere, Yafei kept her charming smile. She knew that the attraction of this chi method was so huge that people would be willing to use their entire fortune to buy it. Just like her prediction, the lack of bids didn't last for long. A nearly bald, middle-aged man shakily yelled out, 210,000! Xiaoyan looked towards the voice. He knew this bald, middle-aged man. The bald man was the owner of a weapon shop that nearly monopolized the entire weapons market in Wutan City. Even though he couldn't compare to the three clan leaders, he was still quite powerful. 230,000! Right after the weapon shop owner yelled out his price, a yellow-robed elder also called out his price. The yellow-robed elder was a huge medicine merchant that owned quite a few shops in Wutan City. Like the middle-aged man, he couldn't compare to the three clan leaders, but nevertheless, he was quite powerful. Giving an evil eye to the elder, the bald middle-aged man yelled out again, 240,000! Within the auction house, there were only a few bids. After all, the 200,000 price was enough to bar the majority of auctioneers from bidding. 300,000! Right when the previous two were about to quit bidding, Jia Li B in the first row finally called out his bid. After Jia Li B called out his bid, the two helplessly backed down. 330,000. In Wutan City, the only people that could rival Jia Li clan were Shao clan and Aoba clan. This price was called out by Aoba clan's clan leader, Aoba Pa. Coldly glancing at Aoba Pa, Jia Li B coldly said, 350,000. Aoba Pa forced out, 370,000, 380,000, 400,000. Under Aoba Pa's continuous raises, Jalebi followed without hesitation. It seems like he was prepared to get the scroll at any cost. When the price got to 430,000, Aoba Pa had to stop bidding. 430,000 was enough to force the powerful Aoba clan into a financial crisis. 450,000. Seeing Aoba Pa back down, Jia B didn't have a chance to celebrate before Xiaojan's bid his price. Coldly staring at Xiaojan, Jia B was full of rage. In the three clans, Zhao clan and Aoba clan had middle Xuan level chi methods, but Jia Li clan only had a low Xuan level chi method, which is why Jia B was willing to pay any price to get this high Xuan chi method. Under the gleeful look of Aoba Pa, Jia B clenched his teeth and spit out, 460,000! 500,000! The impassive Xiaojan raised the price to a whole new level. At the center of the auction hall, watching the two fight over the bids, Yafei's beautiful smile became even more charming. 550,000. His eyes red, Jia Bi finally decided to raise the price again after a brief pause. You've won. Contrary to everyone's predictions, after Xiao Zhan heard Jia Bi's bid, Xiao Zhan only smiled and taunted Jia Bi. The surprise in Jia Bi's expression was quickly replaced with a dark face. The rational side of him knew that he had been played. Xiao Zhan, you win. I'll remember this. After cursing at Xiao Zhan, Jia Bi raised his head to look at the stunned Yafei. Even though he was extremely angry, he wasn't one to be dictated by his emotions, and with a dark face suppressed his emotions. Lady Yafei, should the auction end? Not changing expressions because of Jia Bi's angry stare, Yafei calmly smiled. Her eyes contained a hint of ridicule, and under the tense stare of Jia Bi, lightly tapped the hammer in her hand. Hurricane Chant, won by Jia Li clan leader. Seeing the final moments of the auction, Xiao Yan smiled and slowly got up, leaving the auction house. Once I get the money, I'll start training. 1 year later, I need to give father a surprise. When he was at the doorsteps of the auction house, Xiao Yan lightly muttered. Leaving the first auction hall, Xiao Yan returned to the inspection room and under the respectful gaze of the middle-aged man, patiently waited. A few minutes later, with a flurry of footsteps, two shadows pushed the door open. Are you the owner of the Foundation Elixir? Mister, this must be the first time you've come to Wutan City, right? With a gust of perfume, a charming yet numbing giggle sounded beside Xiao Yan. It made his firm mindset waver. After cursing Yao Jing, Xiao Yan furrowed his face further within the robe, before turning around to look at the red-dressed woman beside him. With close contact, Xiao Yan once again realized the charm within Yafei. On the dazzling face was a pair of watery eyes with long eyelashes that seemed to always send out strands of binding ropes to men. Looking down past the graceful white neck, Xiao Yan was almost sucked into her cleavage. Her natural charm even influenced the calm Xiao Yan. Although Xiao Yan had a red face, thankfully, it was covered by his robe. Calming himself, Xiao Yao slightly nodded, and at the same time, Yao Lao's voice also floated out. The auction was successful. Give me the money. I have something to do. As if she was intrigued by the age of the owner of the black robe, Yafei covered her mouth as she laughed. After a while, she recovered. Please excuse us for a little while longer. We're still working on the paperwork. Slightly nodding, Xiao Yan didn't open his mouth again and moved his sight from Yafei while keeping silent. Looking at the mysterious person covered in the black robe, Yafei's brows furrowed. Looks like her prideful beauty had no effect. Pursing her lips, her gaze swept over the mysterious person, trying to discern every single detail in order to find out who she was dealing with. After sweeping through Xiao Yan and not getting any information, Yafei disappointedly looked at Guni. After their eyes met, she bit her lips and asked, Mister, Yafei has rarely seen an alchemist that doesn't have the alchemist badge. Could I ask for your name? Huh? Girl, coming to this place means that I need to say who I am. Under the black robe, Yao Lao's voice coldly spoke up. Yafei was only curious. If Mister doesn't want to say it, Yafei wouldn't force you. Yafei lightly laughed. Through the black robe, Xiao Yan watched the white legs wrapped in a red dress besides. Even though he couldn't help but admire her beauty, he silently reminded himself that for Yafei to become the top auctioneer, she wasn't some flower pot. Everyone said that beauty was trouble after all, in the entire Wutan City. There were countless suitors, but even to this day, none of them achieved their goal. Even though many of them blamed the primer auction house behind her, none of them would claim that she was a pretty flower pot. With such a clever woman besides him, Xiao Yan was as careful as if he was walking on top of ice. He was afraid that Yafei would discover something from him, but thankfully, with Yao Lao talking, the mysterious geezer wouldn't be charmed by the Yao Jing besides him. At the same time, the taxes that the auctions take would go from 5% to 2%. Hearing that, Xiao Yan's brows jumped. Compared to the blabber before, he liked this kind of solid benefits, so after pausing for a while, he took the crystal card. Seeing the long and pale hand out of the back robe, a glint of confusion flashed across Yafei's eyes. The voice from the person under the black robe was obviously the voice of an old man, but he has a hand that looks like a young man. This person, who is he? At this time, a waitress ran in and courteously handed a green card to Yafei. Mister, the Foundation elixir sold for 40,000 gold coins, and taking out 2% as auction fees, the rest is in here. Yafei smiled while handing the green card over. Taking the green card, Xiaoyan's tense heart fell. The funds for his training were inside that tiny green card. 40,000 gold coins. That would be enough to train to a Daojia. Since he already got the money, Xiaoyan didn't have any more reason to stay, and after carelessly pushing his hands together, a wizened voice calmly said, "I can leave now, right?" Hey, of course. If you would like to auction off any more pills, please keep the primer auction house in mind. Yafei smiled. Carelessly responding, Xiaoyan stood up and left the tense room. Watching the disappearing shadow of Xiaoyan, the smile on Yafei's face slowly disappeared, and she plopped down into a nearby chair. Guni Shushu, is he really an alchemist? After an awkward silence, Yafei broke the stillness. Yeah, and his alchemy skills are better than mine. That's second-tier Foundation elixir. I can't refine it, Guni answered while sighing. Even with the formula? Slightly wincing, Yafei's red mouth carelessly let out a dangerous sentence. Hearing Yafei's words, Guni's face changed, and he hurriedly said, "A formula is an alchemist's life. Please don't think that again. To carelessly anger a mysterious alchemist, even for the Primer family, is a huge deal." A couple of dozen years ago, the famous Chesh family of Jiama Empire enraged Pilking Gu He and was annihilated by 4 Dao Wangs that Gu He sent. Even the Jiama Empire's royalty wouldn't control the matter. Even though our family is much stronger than the Czech family, it's best not to offend some mysterious alchemist. Alchemists are like a hornet's nest. Once you poke it, he'll find countless friends, and many experts would love to have an alchemist owe them a favor. Watching the panicking Guni, Yafei bitterly smiled while massaging her forehead. Guni Shushu, what are you saying? I wasn't thinking any of that. Do you think that Yafei has wasted these few years? I was reminding you. Hearing Yafei's words, Guni let out a breath. He was really afraid that she would do something stupid. Pursing her lips, Yafei propped up her cheek while sighing. Alchemists, they really are some dangerous people, but why don't I have such a talent? After he sneaked back into his room, Xiaoyan quickly closed the door and went to the corner of the room, before finally taking out a bunch of medical herbs and magic crystals. He carefully placed them in the cabinet and deeply sniffed the smell of herbs as he smiled with relief. To practice uninterrupted, Xiaoyan had purchased the amount of herbs needed for 8 months of usage, allowing him to practice non-stop for the rest of the year. As he affectionately patted the cabinet, his lips cracked open, and he lazily goes on the side of his bed, putting his head down. Today's activities had made him really tired. "Yaner, are you there?" A mumbled voice and a knock passed through his door. Opening his blurry eyes, Xiaoyan hurriedly jumped out of his bed, then opened his room's door, looking at Xiaozhou outside of the door and asked, "Father, do you need something? Can't I see for you even if I don't need anything from you? You kid, you hid from me for 2 months." Xiaozhan reprimanded as he rubbed Xiaoyan's head affectionately. Looking at Xiaozhan's warm smiling face, Xiaoyan's was moved as he pumped his sore nose, not knowing what to say. "Are you still feeling responsible for that?" "Haha, if she can't take a liking to my son, it is her loss. You don't have to be sad. Why should a great man act like a little kid? I know that this son of Xiaozhan is not a cripple," Xiaozhan boldly said. "Haha, father, after 3 years, Yan will go to the faction of Misty Clouds personally," Xiaoyan said in a soft voice with a smile. Xiao Zhao's smiling face became more serious as he stared at Xiaoyan. After a while, he said with some hesitation, "Father feels fine, but are you really going to? Father isn't saying that you can't reach Nalan Yanren, but the strength of the faction of Misty Clouds?" Xiaoyan smiled as he nodded, his thin lips forcing a somewhat stubborn line. "Father, that there are some things that as a man I have to bear." "Aha, this temper of yours resembles mine much. If your 2 big brothers knew that you thought like this, they would probably be very happy." Towards Xiaoyan's dedication, Xiaozhan smiled pleased before sighing and nodded heavily. "Good, father waits for his son to give him some face. I want the old bastard Nalan Shu to beg me to remake that marriage promise." Xiaoyan nodded and couldn't help but laugh. "Hey, I'll give you this. Consider it as your father's support." He handed to Xiaoyan a very familiar white bottle. Looking at this elixir that went back to his own hands, Xianyan didn't know whether to laugh or to cry, but on his face he maintained a puzzled expression. Father, this is Foundation Elixir. It'll accelerate your duchy cultivation. I just bought it today. Xiaozhen's mouth smiled. You must have spent a lot of money for this, right? As he received the white jade bottle, Xiaoyan's heart felt warm. 40,000 gold coins, but if it can be of use to you, it is worth its price. Xiaozhen smiled as though he didn't care. You spent 40,000 gold coins for buying me this Foundation Spirit Elixir? Won't the elders perhaps cause trouble to you using this excuse? Xiaoyan smiled bitterly. Sisk, I am the clan leader. They can at most utter some words, Xiaozhen said coldly. Father, thank you. During the adult ceremony in 1 year, I will make them shut their mouth completely. Xiaoyan calmly laughed as he said that. Good, I am waiting for my son to transform once more. Although he didn't know from where Xiaoyan's confidence came from, Xiaozhen was very happy seeing his son's confident appearance. All right, I won't disturb your rest. If there are any problems, come and see your father as a family member. I cannot let you be disgraced. Waving his hand, Xiaozhen turned around as he took big strides leaving the front yard. Shit, I also have to face these old fools now. I only spent 40,000 gold coins, but they will act like I had spent the money that was supposed to be used for buying their coffins. From the night, Xiaozhen's mutters floated to Xiaoyan. Looking at his father vanish into the darkness, Xiaoyan touched his nose and smiled while saying in a low voice, Relax, father. I will use reality to make these people quiet. 3 years before, I could make them look up at me. 3 years after, I will still be able to. After standing at his door for a while, Xiaoyan put away the white jade bottle. Then he shot a look at the corner of the room, teasing, Girl, is it fun to eavesdrop on people? Xiaoyan Gege, that was keen from you. From the corner, a pretty young girl wearing a purple skirt came out elegantly. Leaning her little head, a big smile was revealed on her beautiful face. Looking at the mischievous girl's face, Xiaoyan helplessly shook his head. Where did Xiaoyan Gege go this afternoon? Junair came forward, walked up lightly and asked with a smile. I was just on a little stroll. Is that so? Her eyes looking up and down, Junair suddenly took a step forward and bent slightly. Her nose wrinkled while she said, I smell the fragrance of a woman. Come on, why would I have a woman's fragrance? Xiaoyan's immature face suddenly blushed, but in the dark, his, as well as the girl's face, couldn't be seen clearly. He. Seemingly liking this predicament Xiaoyan was in, Junair laughed and a moment later stopped laughing, before quietly saying, A moment ago I also heard Xiao Shushu's words. I believe that Xiaoyan Gege, yup. In the future, you really want to go to the faction of the Misty Clouds. Junair will come with you, to help you. Hearing this, Xiaoyan blinked and tightly stared at the young girl's beautiful small face. Under Xiaoyan's unrestrained vision, Junair's her face flushed a little from shyness as she whispered, Xiaoyan Gege, what are you looking at? Shun, can also blush, such a rare sight, Xiaoyan unexpectedly said with a smile. Junair coldly glanced at Xiaoyan, and she muttered under her breath, And you can also glance at people this way. Good, have confidence in Jegi. Although the faction of Misty Clouds is formidable, I am still young. This Yun, who spoils that girl Nalan Yanran, definitely isn't too great of a teacher. Xiaoyan smiled as he rubbed the black hair of the young girl. Well, it is late. Head back for a rest. Looking at Xiaoyan waving, Junair shakes her head reluctantly and went into the darkness under his sight. After turning a corner, sounds could be heard from a quarrel between Xiaozhen and the several elders. The topic of the quarrel, how the 40,000 gold coins were used. Stopping, Junair's little eyebrows wrinkled and she lets out a small sigh while a purple card appeared between her slim fingers. Her fingertips flicking the purple-colored gold card, making the purple gold card flash into golden light as it soared towards the room where the elders are quarreling with Xiaozhen. Her fingertips flicking the purple-colored gold card, making the purple gold card flash into golden light as it soared towards the room where the elders are quarreling with Xiaozhen. The room suddenly became silent while Junair faintly said, This is the money for the Foundation Elixir. In this card there are 100,000 gold coins. Now that I've given you this, I hope that you elders won't continue to give Uncle Xiao trouble. The room was completely silent before the yes acknowledgments from the three elders came through. Octane blast! In the forest, a crisp roar rung out. An agile shadow was jumping flexibly in these woods, and even though the forest was densely covered with thorns, they didn't obstruct him at all. In the next instant, the shadow unexpectedly stopped before a 0.5-meter large tree, and with the body half slanted, an elbow slammed against the tree. Bang! A noise rang as wood splinters scattered. Spidery cracks appeared on the point of impact and spread throughout the whole tree. Crunch! The tree had a huge gaping hole with the elbow hit and emitted a crunching sound before loudly falling to the ground a moment later. The moment the big tree fell, the agile shadow quickly took a few steps back vigorously like a monkey and lightly floated to a green-colored stone. Looking at the results of his efforts, Xiaoyan's delicate small face showed a smile. In the past 3 months, this was the first time he had succeeded in using the Octane Blast, a high Zhuan level skill. This Octane Blast that could rival a Didu technique didn't let Xiaoyan down. With Xiaoyan's 6 Duanqi, he could rival the destruction of a person at 8 Duanqi. The more one's Duanqi level rises, the harder it is for one to raise their Duanqi. But since the auction, Xiaoyan went into intensive training for 3 months, and only a few days before, did his Duanqi jump from 5 Duanqi to 6 Duanqi. To gain 1 Duanqi in 3 months, although this speed is slower compared to the 2 months needed for reaching 5 Duanqi, Xiaoyan was still very satisfied. When he was training before, it took him an entire half year to go from 5 Duanqi to 6 Duanqi. The current speed is terrifying. After having used Octane Blast, Xiaoyan's whole body was like a sponge which was suddenly squeezed of its water. A noticeable pain was constantly corroding his nerves, while the veins on his arms were visibly pulsing. These were the signs of extreme exhaustion. Licking his lips, Xiaoyan struggled to turn his head to look at his right elbow. What entered his vision was a crimson elbow. Tss. A corner of his mouth cracked open while Xiaoyan inhaled a deep breath and said with a bitter smile, "No wonder I had to bear such harsh beatings. Or else what this strike would have broken wouldn't have been the tree, but my arm." This Octane Blast skill is pretty much a comparison of who has the harder body. His whole body lying on the ice-cold stone, Xiaoyan's rapid breathing slowly calmed down. However, the aching sensations of Xiaoyan's body made him not want to move even his finger yet. With Xiaoyan's 6 Duanqi, he could at most use the Octane Blast once, and after using it, he would be completely depleted of his strength until much later. Xiaoyan threw back his head, narrowed his eyes, and lazily looked at the floating clouds in the blue sky. A slight breeze brushes by, blowing a wisp of his black hair to flap against his forehead. Seeping through his body as Xiaoyan rested were the foundation elixirs that he had absorbed for the past months, and now they were at work, repairing his muscle tissue and cells at maximum speed, bringing new energy to Xiaoyan. "Teacher, how long do I need to keep practicing before I can attain 7 Duanqi?" While his eyes were shut, Xiaoyan suddenly whispered. His goal was to attain 7th rank and thus acquiring the qualification to enter the Shaoklan's Duqi Hall, where he could find Qi methods to practice. Even though at this point those Qi methods are at a far too low level for him, he must acquire these qualifications because it related to the face of his father. A cold breeze blew by as Yao Lao's transparent body appeared beside the enormous stone. With a happy expression in his face as he looked at his junior, Yao Lao first took note of the big tree. Then he nodded as he said with a smile, "Your training speed is beyond my expectations. Originally, I believed that even with the help of the elixir, you would need a year before entering 7 Duanqi, or is it because you were suppressed far too hard before bouncing back now? Looking at this progress, within 2 months, you can certainly enter the 7th Duqi rank." Hearing this, Xiaoyan's lips lifted up, making a turn of a faint smile. He really wanted to know, after these 3 years during which he has been unceasingly taunted by his clan members, when they will see his strength, what kind of expression will they show? That day when he was talking to Nalan Yanran in the main hall, didn't those words apply to them as well? "I, Xiaoyan, could create a miracle 3 years ago, and 3 years later, I can still do it." His vision glittered a little as Xiaoyan thought about half a year before, how he was taunted in the main hall. But even though his silhouette was lonely, it was unbending and persistent. "Nalan Yanran, I am catching up to you step by step. Wait for me." We shall meet in faction of misty clouds in 3 years. The corner of his mouth suddenly frowning a little, the youth jumped as he raised his head to roar at the distant sky. Watching at his junior roaring, Yao Lao showed a smile and didn't stop him. People need pressure to mature. The current Xiao Yan has enough talent, but what he needs is pressure to push him. Nalan Yanran's decision was the best pressure possible. Let her be your stepping stone. In the road to become respected, you still have a big distance left to finish. Go, let's head back for practicing. Roaring several times, the smile on Xian Yao's face grew bigger. Soon he jumped off the boulder and waved at Yao Lao before beginning his descent from the mountain, still smiling. Time was like water, slipping through one's finger quickly and mysteriously. The scorching summer had been replaced with the cool fall, and the light green branches had already showed hints of yellow. The room was still neat, and sunlight would still scatter through the windows. There was a wood basin in the room where a young man was training. He had both of his eyes closed and both hands folded. The training for the majority of the year had forced a hint of stubbornness to appear on the young man's delicate and smooth face. His tight lips showed how determined he was, and his original white skin, that was as white as a woman's, had become slightly yellow with the beatings in the past months. His small physique didn't seem too muscular, but had the burst potential like a jaguar. Looking from every angle, the young man was transforming at a terrifying speed, and when this transformation was done, he would shock everyone. Under the smooth breathing of the young man, strands of green airflow slowly lifted from the wood basin and followed the young man's breath into his body. I will get to 7 Duanqi today. When he was training, Xiao Yan suddenly had the thought pop into his head. Even though there was no proof to back the thought up, it felt as if it was the word of God, the truth. In the previous month, Xiao Yan had attempted to get to 7 Duanqi quite a few times, but every time failure would greet him. Maybe it was because today's training was basically the last drop to a full cup, but finally Xiao Yan knew that he would get to 7 Duanqi. The sudden thought made Xiao Yan almost break his folded hands apart and exit from training. Thankfully, Xiao Yan was able to suppress the thought and take an effort to calm down. As his breath calmed, Xiao Yan started to greedily absorb energy to break through 7 Duanqi. In the wooden basin, the green elixir started emitting 7 colored sparkles as countless strands evaporated and rushed into Xiao Yan's body. As the green airflows increased in number, they not only covered Xiao Yan's body, but also hid the wooden basin within a layer of green mist. Under Xiao Yan's absorption of the energy, the green liquid within the basin was paling considerably. Because of the huge amount of energy that he absorbed, Xiao Yan's small face began to flush red, but also glow hints of green. Xiao Yan, who was rushing 7 Duanqi, had undoubtedly become a huge magnet, not only sucking energy from the surrounding air, but also creating mini whirlpools within the wood basin. In the first 9 Duanqis, 1 to 3 Duanqi were considered low level, 4 to 6 Duanqi were middle level, and 7 to 9 Duanqi were high level. The 7th Duanqi was basically a gap between Duanqis. Once one gets to 7 Duanqi, then they would have gotten to the high-level Duanqi and have a couple times as much Do Qi compared to 6 Duanqi. Therefore, 7 Duanqi was considered as the first lock to becoming a dojo. With the green whirlpools, the green liquid within the basin became lighter and lighter in color before changing to a bowl of clear water. Without the energy from the foundation elixir, the green aura around Xiao Yan's face slackened, and he could only absorb the energy in the air to complete his 7 Duanqi. Even though it was possible to use the energy in the air to break through 7 Duanqi, but it would take much longer, and even if he does get to 7 Duanqi, he would need an entire month before he would find himself truly at the level of 7 Duanqi. But what Xiao Yan was missing the most was time. When the foundation elixir finally gave out, Xiao Yan's black ring flickered, and a jade-green foundation elixir droplet fell into the basin. Suddenly, the clear water turned back into a shade of dark green. With the fresh foundation elixir's energy, Xiao Yan silently thanked Yao Lao, and while keeping his hands folded, controlled his breathing to crazily absorb the new energy. After crazily absorbing energy for an entire hour, Xiao Yan finally slowed down, and at this point, the dark green water had paled by a few shades. Taking in the final strand of energy, Xiao Yan's body, after a brief pause, started shaking violently. His stomach pushed in, while his eyes suddenly opened. Within the black pupils were hints of white and green. Finally opening his mouth, Xiaoyan let out a breath of stale air. After the stale breath left Xiaoyan, he finally straightened. With his eyes blankly staring forward, Xiaoyan turned his neck to meet crisp, bone-cracking sounds. Then he curled his hand to feel a solid strength that brought a smile to Xiaoyan's lips. Finally, 7 Duan Qi. Closing his eyes, Xiaoyan started to explore the abundant Do Qi within his body. Xiaoyan lay in the wooden basin, his body submerged in the cool foundation elixir, absorbed in the feeling of firm strength that he had just acquired. Normal methods of getting to 7 Duan Qi required a period of rest and recovery. However, Xiaoyan did not need it since he had the foundation elixir. He was already in peak condition. After lying in the basin for a while, until his excited emotions calmed, Xiaoyan finally lazily got up. The attached water droplets sparkled joyously under the bright sunshine. Taking a lazy stretch, Xiaoyan's bones gave crisp cracks as if they were brand new. Carelessly turning his head, Xiaoyan's right hand locked onto his bed and pulled his clothes into his hand. Nice. My Du Qi increased by quite a bit. I should be able to influence someone's actions now, right? Xiaoyan muttered as he dressed himself. Unfortunately, this vacuum hand doesn't have any power when attacking. Sucking blood from one's enemy applies only to people with weaker Do Qi than me. For anyone with greater Do Qi than me, it'd be among the worst to use. Contemplating the negative effects of vacuum hand, Xiaoyan sighed in disappointment. However, even if the technique was terrible, it was the first Dao technique that he had ever owned. Just as he was about to step out of the basin, a thought came to him. He pursed his lips. Eyes gleaming, Xiaoyan slowly curled his right hand into a fist and raised his arm so that his hand was about half a foot away from a flower vase. He stared intently at his hand and deliberately avoided looking at his target. Xiaoyan's Do Qi burst from his palm without the guidance of Qi. Licking his lips, Xiaoyan's Do Qi burst out of his palm without any planned Qi paths or pressure points. To be able to externalize Du Qi without the use of Qi paths was something the Dado sure could barely do. Xiaoyan's attempt resulted in nothing more than a moderate gust of wind. The air flowed from his palm and connected with the vase, almost knocking it off the table. Even though he failed to externalize the Du Qi, Xiaoyan's face bore an expression of elation. He excitedly rubbed his hands together and quickly took a few steps back before raising his hand at the base again. Vacuum hand! A small roar and a huge pulling force forced the flower vase to spiral towards Xiaoyan. Right when the vase was about 3 feet away from Xiaoyan, the pulling force on Xiaoyan's hand disappeared and was replaced by Du Qi rapidly trying to externalize on his palm. Suddenly, a huge gust of wind blew against the approaching vase. Pung! The two counteracting forces met in midair, and the vase that was in the middle of the clash suddenly broke into countless ceramic pieces. Seeing the results of his experimentation, Xiaoyan's small face was full of happy surprise. The combination of the pulling and pushing force caused a destruction far greater than he had imagined. Even though Xiaoyan's plentiful Du Qi had almost been exhausted by that experiment, Xiaoyan was still extremely excited. The pushing force was caused through a low-level method, which had a great consumption of Du Qi with barely mediocre results. If he had a Du technique that was the opposite of vacuum hand, then the two combined, he was sure, would have a great effect. Brat, pretty good. To have thought up this method to strengthen vacuum hand. The black rings sparkling, Yao Lao ghostly floated out and praised Xiaoyan while inspecting the ceramic fragments. Xiaoyan smiled and his eyes quickly circled around Yao Lao. On Xiaoyan's face was an expression of sadness and fawning. If there was a Do technique that would create a pushing effect, and if you could train that Dao technique to a high level, then this low Zhuan level vacuum hand could have the power of a middle to high Xuan technique. As if he didn't see Xiaoyan's fawning face, Yao Lao muttered to himself. Teacher, you know that non-attack oriented Dao techniques are super rare. Getting the vacuum hand was pure luck, and now, where do you expect me to find a Do technique to complement vacuum hand? Xiaoyan tilted his head and said dejectedly, Stop making that innocent face. I know that you're trying to get it from me. Giving Xiaoyan an evil eye, Yao Lao angrily said, It's not like someone else didn't think of what you just thought up, but these two non-attack oriented Do techniques are extremely rare, and therefore, no one has been able to actually combine their effects. Even teacher doesn't have something? Hearing that, Xiao Yan's small face darkened. He knew that without a set technique to produce a pushing force, he would have to rely on his Du Qi, externalizing, which was not a smart move. Seeing Xiao Yan's dispirited face, Yao Lao smiled while massaging his forehead. After a while, he said, "There was someone before that begged me for a pill. I think that I took a Du technique like vacuum hand as payment. If I didn't have an already finished pill at that time, I would not have traded with that person. This was pretty long ago. If you didn't remind me today, then I probably would have really forgotten about it." "All right, I found it." Moving his finger from his forehead, Yao Lao placed his finger on Xiao Yan's forehead. With the finger, a huge influx of information overwhelmed Xiao Yan, and only after a while did Xiao Yan finally understand the new glob of information. Fire palm, low Xuan level, able to create huge gusts. The simple explanation along with the uncreative name made this low Xuan level technique seem extremely shabby. The founder of this was a blacksmith who had been a blacksmith for his entire life. Because of the fire of the furnace after a couple decades, he invented this technique. Watching the tight-faced Xiao Yan, Yao Lao taunted. Rolling his eyes, Xiao Yan was quite impressed with the blacksmith. Creating a Du technique was no mean feat and definitely not something that an ordinary hammer-wielding blacksmith could create. Fire palm wasn't hard to learn, and under Yao Lao's help, Xiao Yan only took 2 hours before having an introductory grasp on the basics of it. Standing in his room, Xiao Yan stared at the final flower vase in his room. Taking a deep breath and curling his hand, he said, "Vacuum hand." With the strong pull, the flower vase quickly flew towards Xiao Yan. Staring at the incoming vase, Xiao Yan quickly stopped using vacuum hand and forced his Do Qi to follow the Qi paths of fire palm. Fire palm! Right when the vase was about to hit Xiao Yan's forehead, a strong gust of wind emerged from Xiao Yan's hand, and suddenly the room was subjected to a wind on par with a hurricane. Peng! Another crisp sound of a vase breaking sounded, but this time, the vase was ground into a fine dust from the two opposing forces. Great! With white dust covering his whole body, Xiao Yan quickly jumped out of the vase's explosion ground zero. Watching the outcome of the vase, light shone in Xiao Yan's eyes. If he was able to master both of the skills and change them without pause, then he could make unprepared people take a huge loss. Patting off the white dust, Xiao Yan knew that he had a new training task in the next 3 months. 3 months later will be his coming-of-age ceremony. A lot of people are probably hoping that I make a fool of myself at the coming-of-age ceremony, right? In the scattered room, a young and cold laugh sounded. The final 3 months had mostly passed, and it was only a single month away from Xiao Yan's coming-of-age ceremony. Within the clean room, Xiao Yan blankly stared at the green liquid inside the wood basin. What he was looking at was the last of the foundation elixir. At the final few stages of Duan Qi, it was becoming incredibly difficult to raise his Duan Qi. Xiao Yan's 7 Duan Qi hadn't been rising by much for the past 3 months, and the feeling of breaking through to 8 Duan Qi never came to Xiao Yan. Staring at the basin like a fool for a while, Xiao Yan finally pulled back his gaze while shaking his head. Can I use this last foundation elixir to get to 8 Duan Qi? Slowly straightening his numb body, Xiao Yan surprisingly didn't start training. Instead, he took out black clothes from his closet. The month before the coming-of-age ceremony, all of the participants in the ceremony had to attend a test. The test was to eliminate those whose Du Qi wasn't high enough. Those that had more than 7 Duan Qi were allowed a chance to go into the Do Qi Hall to find a Qi method after completing their coming-of-age ceremony. Right after he put on his clothes, a light knock came from the door. Xiao Yan Gege. Ji means brother in Chinese. Are you there? Hearing a high girly voice, Xiao Yan's brows jumped while he quickly buttoned his clothes before hiding the wood basin in an overlooked corner. After checking that all was fine, he slowly waltzed to the door and opened the door. When the door opened, warm sunshine flew onto him, and Xiao Yan with the black clothing seemed especially spirited. Outside of the door, a young girl wearing a light and refreshing green robe with a purple cloth belt was patiently waiting for Xiao Yan. Watching the girl outside of his door, Xiao Yan was shocked for quite a while before recovering and said, "This early, I thought it was a goddess that came down, but taking a closer look, it was Shun Er." Hearing Xiao Yan taunting praise, Shun Er's agile eyes blinked and her small mouth curved into a smile. However, from her brows that were almost in the shape of a crescent moon, one could tell the happiness she felt. With a hint of happiness in her eyes, Shun-er raised her delicate chin and started examining the young man in front of her. After a year's worth of training, Xiaoyan had grown out of his naivety, and instead, on his delicate and well-figured face, were a few hints of manly charm. After a long period of beat-receiving training, his overall body tone was full of muscles, and even though he was covered by a black shirt, his figure seemed rippling with energy. Walking out of the room and closing the door, Xiaoyan finally saw the dumbstruck Shun-er that wasn't even blinking as she stared at him. Confused, Xiaoyan took a look of himself and asked, "Is there anything wrong with me?" Her beautiful face blushing, Shun-er quickly moved her sight away and smiled. "Let's go, Xiaoyan Ge. Today's the pre-test for the coming-of-age ceremony. Are you ready?" Narrowing his eyes, Xiaoyan shrugged his shoulders while his lips went up with a stubborn pride. His hands slowly curled into fists as he said, "The title of cripple, I'll return it to those that gave it to me today." Watching the confident Xiaoyan, Shun-er also nodded her head. "I believe in Xiaoyan Ge. Of course you believe in me. You've probably determined what Duanqi I'm at already." Xiaoyan gave her a white eye and helplessly said. Watching the depressed Xiaoyan, Shun-er slightly nodded her head, but quickly responded, "Getting to 7 Duanqi from 3 Duanqi in less than a year. Xiaoyan Ge's talent, even Shun-er's talent, is far inferior to yours. All right, let's go!" Xiaoyan touched his nose and affectionately tapped Shun-er's head. Then he quickly started taking huge strides to the clan's training field. Watching the completely different backline of Xiaoyan, without the sadness and loneliness from the past, Shun-er smiled and muttered, "Xiaoyan Ge. Shun-er knew that you would take back your respect and honor." On the Green Rock training field, at least 100 boys and girls were waiting there. Their chatter was like a low roar that spread quite far. At the middle of the training field was a huge black monument, which was a testing monument that only clans with quite a bit of power could own because of its high price. Next to the black monument was the same impassive tester from 1 year ago. On an elevated platform to the left of the training field were the clan's more prominent members. At the middle of the platform was the clan leader, Xiao Zhan, surrounded by the 3 elders. Inside the field, the about-to-be-tested examinees were all standing. Those that performed quite highly before didn't show much stress on their faces, while those that didn't have much talent had tense and scared faces. Xiao Zhan examined the people in the training field with a dark face and sighed inwardly. "Yan can you pass this test?" "Clan leader, it's almost time. Why isn't Xiaoyan here yet?" The second elder furrowed his brows and asked. Xiao Zhan gave him a sideways glance and said, "It's not time yet? Why be in such a hurry? The second elder I know isn't such a hasty person." With the rebuttal from Xiao Zhan, the second elder's face was somewhat ugly when he coldly retorted, "Even if you gave him that foundation elixir, he can't possibly get to 7 Duanqi in 1 month. You should stop hoping for some miracle." Hearing that, Xiao Zhan's face flashed with anger. He was also worrying about that, and the second elder hit his soft spot. But right when he was about to respond to the second elder's bare-bone words, a slight disturbance occurred in examinees in the training field. Looking towards the disturbance, Xiao Zhan saw 2 shadows slowly coming over from the end of the path, leading to the training field. Their steps weren't hurried, as if they were unaffected by today's test. Narrowing his eyes to get a better sight of the black-clothed young man's light smile, Xiao Zhan didn't know why, but he felt much better all of a sudden. Watching the Xiaoyan who was coming with Shun-er, the young men in the training field showed a face full of envy and disdain. In the entire Xiao clan, the only one who was close to Shun-er was the famous cripple. At the edge of the field and surrounded by a huge number of peers, Xiao Ning stared at Xiaoyan with anger emanating from his eyes. "Little bastard, after today, let's see if you have enough face to be with Shun-er." With a low curse, Xiao Ning smiled, thinking about the misfortune about to befall Xiaoyan. Ignoring the gazes of envy and anger, Xiaoyan brought Shun-er to the back of the line and started chatting. Watching the relaxed Xiaoyan, the people on the platform were all surprising, thinking that maybe Xiaoyan didn't know how this test would change his future. "He knows he's going to fail," the second elder teased. The second elder was expecting Xiao Zhan to rage against him, but after waiting for quite a while, Xiao Zhan didn't say anything. In shock, the second elder tilted his head to look at Xiao Zhan. "Second elder, instead of predictions, You should look at the results. Or else, when the time comes, you'd be throwing away face. Xiao Zhan gave a deep glance at Xiao Yan, who was relaxing under the sun. His mouth twitching, the second elder retorted, "Hope so. I'm also hoping that he can bring me some surprises." "All right, it's time. Let's start." The first elder cut both of them off and started the test. Xiao Zhan nodded while standing up. Taking a look at the silent training field, he roared, "You are all new blood of the Xiao clan and should know the importance of this test. From the test, if you're above 7 Duanxi, then you've made it. However, if you didn't make it, you can challenge someone that's about 7 Duanxi, according to the rules. If you win, you will also make it." All right, now that everyone knows the rules, let's start the test. With Xiao Zhan's low roar, the trainees all began to tense up. Besides the black monument, the impassive operator stepped up and took out a heavy pamphlet that had all of the names. His cold voice made him seem like the devil to people called out by him, cross-legged sitting on the clean and smooth ground. Xiao Yan calmly watched those whose Du Qi didn't make the requirement and were crying. Coldly pursing his lips, he didn't feel any pity for them. He knew from first-hand experience that they loved to pick on those that had lower Du Qi than them, in particular the cripple that was once a genius. When they were insulting clansmen that were of lower Du Qi than themselves, they probably never thought that this day would come. The one who humiliates gets humiliated in the end. Jun Er, sitting next to Xiao Yan, also was impassive. Like a lotus that wouldn't be affected by the mud around it, she slowly twirled her head while sneaking peeks at Xiao Yan. "Xiao Mei!" The operator's cold voice brought a jump to Xiao Yan's brows, and his closed eyelids slowly went up. Shun Er, who was intently watching Xiao Yan from the side, curled her nose as she saw Xiao Yan's actions. She used to be quite close to Xiao Yan Gigi. While narrowing her eyes, Shun Er stared at the red-clothed girl walking up. Soon, Shun Er blinked and tilted her head to look at Xiao Yan's curved smile, saying, "I'm quite curious about what kind of attitude she'll have towards Xiao Yan Gege after today." Xiao Yan shrugged his shoulders and whispered back, "Some things once destroyed will always be destroyed. No matter how much it's repaired, there will always be an obvious crack. In this clan, there aren't many people that I approve of. Does Jun Er count?" Shun Er's red mouth made a mischievous smile as she asked Xiao Yan. Taking a strand of Shun Er's hair and gently slipping it through his finger, Xiao Yan answered, "Of course." Her large eyes curved into beautiful crescent moons, while her actual gaze fell upon a blank space. The sight of her was entrancing. Back when we were still small, he would sneak into my room and try to help me improve my body. Even though it was such a stupid method that, looking back on it, I can't believe that he would have thought it up. He still continued it for 2 years. A smile appeared on her delicate face, bringing out 2 cute dimples. Turning her head, Shun Er thought, "In this entire clan, there aren't many people that Shun Er approves of either. Only you." From afar, Xiao Ning felt his face twitching when he saw the close conversation between Xiao Yan and Shun Er. Jealousy raged in his heart while he resisted the urge to go over there and destroy perfect scene. "Dozi Li, 8 Duan." On the black monument, a bright light was emitted as those words were displayed on it. "Xiao Mei, Dozi Li, 8 Duan, high level." Taking a glance at the black monument, the impassive operator slightly nodded while calling out her score. Hearing the operator's voice, Xiao Mei let out a breath as her face became filled with pride. To go from 7 Duanxi to 8 Duanxi in just 1 year was an accomplishment that would net her among the top 5 in her generation. With such an impressive result, it was no wonder that she would be so excited. The operator's voice led a huge disturbance within the training fields as glances of envy and jealousy fell toward Xiao Mei. To raise 1 Duanxi in 1 year, barely decent. Touching his nose, Xiao Yan calmly evaluated. "Yup." Shun Er played with her hair as she carelessly glanced over Xiao Mei, who was surrounded by her friends like a princess. But after Xiao Mei, out of the dozen or so people, only 1 person got to 7 Duanxi. The rest were all eliminated. Xiao Shun Er! The impassive operator, surprisingly, had a bit of emotion when he called this name. Everyone's gaze fell upon Shun Er, who was sitting next to Xiao Yan as they heard that name. "Xiao Yan Gei, don't be too surprised later." Standing up, Shun Er bent down to mischievously smile at Xiao Yan. His brows twitching, Xiao Yan watched the beautiful backline of Shun Er as he muttered, "Did she become a Duja?" That wraps up the content for today's episode. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel to get notifications for the next episode. For now, goodbye, and see you next time.